Hi, this is Taryn Grome, editor of Pharma Voice. We met with numerous inspirational thought leaders at this year's DIA annual conference as part of our Editors Take video series. I hope you enjoyed this discussion.
In this episode, Taryn meets with Kevin Bickford, Senior Director, Clinical Operations, and Joseph Skurza, President at ClinicalRM.
Welcome to Philadelphia and the annual DIA conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is ClinicalRM doing to prepare and respond to global health crises, particularly infectious diseases such as Zika and Ebola, that have drawn international media attention and pose a serious threat to global health?
Well, ClinicalRM is actually a clinical research organization that focuses in infectious disease. So by nature, our mission really is to work with pandemic and epidemic crises globally. And just recently, as an example, ClinicalRM is closely working in the Zika crisis right now, which is a global epidemic that BARDA has asked ClinicalRM to assist with some blood collection protocols. And right now we're currently working in that space in Puerto Rico as well as in the U.S. And we also have some additional endeavors that we're working on for blood collection with Kevin, who we'll talk a little bit about in Ecuador as well as Latin American countries.
Very interesting. Kevin?
ClinicalRM is also at the forefront of the Ebola efforts back in 2014 during the outbreak, sending 3 plasmapheresis vehicles over to West Africa. We are currently still working on some studies to characterize the disease via longitudinal study. And we're also working on some vaccine studies and looking for additional opportunities to work with the government and sponsor companies for additional treatments for Ebola. So we are still actively working on preparing in the event of another epidemic there.
How can an efficient adaptive design model support infectious disease outbreaks and meet rapid response needs with clinical trials?
So we currently have a protocol that is approved in Sierra Leone, it's the Adaptive Design Protocol for Ebola. That is something that we're continuing to develop. It is currently in place. One of the benefits of an adaptive design protocol is that you are bringing different treatments and a greater number of treatments to potential patients. This is a trial that we're still developing and still adding arms onto. It's a very unique design that will allow us to continue to add different treatment arms while the study is actually rolling. And it really is probably the best way to bring many treatments, many potential efficacious treatments to the patients quickly, and to get a large amount of data for these treatments for researchers to analyze.
That's extremely critical, and it's a great point. It's extremely critical when you think of an epidemic such as Ebola, where you have the opportunity in a very short period of time to use different treatments in different combinations. And can get answers very quickly versus a randomized clinical trial, which would take drug A versus drug B or standard of care, and you'd have to wait to its end to find out if that drug was efficacious or not. It's better if you can actually use a adaptive design that is almost, we call it the never-ending trial, and we have a unique design with thanks to the berry design that we're very proud of at ClinicalRM.
What effective preparation can be made to respond to a pandemic?
Well, it's collaboration. I think what we've learned from the Ebola crisis, thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates as well as many other foundations that helped our support, we were able to get a consortium together, and I think Kevin would agree, getting buy-in from the indigenous countries that have the disease is the number one concern in a successful answer and moving forward, especially in Ebola. We were able to work with countries and their Ministry of Health, as well as College of Pharmacy and many of the locals that were chiefdoms, especially in Africa, where ClinicalRM was on the ground with them and still are to date, working with them, especially with Kevin's running a survivor program, for example. And we're actually working with many of the survivors to find out how long the Ebola could potentially be in the urogenital, as well as some of these immune repositories in their system. So the key is finding the right people, getting academic experts as well as industry experts to find out if a treatment or a solution can be had, and grouping together and moving as one unit together very rapidly.
I'd like to underscore one of the points that Joe just made. It's very important, and we've learned that it's very critical to learn from the local medical research community when you're trying to address some of these challenges in Ebola research. I think it's been a cornerstone of our success. It's something that we're trying to replicate in other countries as well. For example, we are trying to use some of the survivors in the actual research staff, but also really making sure that everyone understands what the goals of the research are, but also making sure that when the research is being designed, that we understand how this will be implemented in reality in West Africa.
What lessons from a more concentrated outbreak, such as Ebola in West Africa, can be applied to the response needs of a more widespread pandemic?
Well, ClinicalRM is working on a program for best practices learning from a pandemic such as Ebola. And unfortunately, I'd have to say that there's not many treatments that have actually come out of Ebola to date. But what we did learn is that you need to collaborate with individuals from other different agencies and even CROs. It's very important to realize what you have up against in a certain situation and what you're able to do as a unified group. So I'd say collaboration is the number one concern moving forward. What I think ClinicalRM did very well, and I think the other thing would be make sure that you run the program and have an end goal in mind with all of the collaborators. And it's a very important point that you leave something behind. And ClinicalRM to date has left labs, ELISAs that Kevin has helped build. It's very important to leave a footprint in some of these countries because they're third world countries. They've just been hit with Ebola or dengue fever or yellow fever, and it's wiped some of their regions out. So it's very important to leave something behind and also cross-pollinate so that you can train the indigenous folks because they're excellent. They have great laboratory skills and they're trained at the local universities. So they thirst for this knowledge and you'll be teaching them and you can actually build part of your research arm in country.
What other diseases are you looking at using your model?
So the model that we're working on that's been successful with Ebola can really be applied to any emerging health crises. I mean, we're looking at everything from dengue fever to chikungunya, really anywhere the need goes. I think that being able to go in, work with the local staff and teach them, build up the infrastructure as Joe mentioned, that's a model that ClinicalRM will use.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate your participation.
Thank you.
For more information on this topic, visit our Thought Leaders website.
For more Editors Take videos from the DIA Annual Conference, visit www.pharmavoice.com. Thanks for joining us.